If I know who you are or not, if you're in my home whenever you're not supposed to be in my home, I'm calling the cops. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer, everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Okay, we are moving on in our review of the James Patterson book. Now, again, I haven't bothered to buy any other books besides this one. And the main reason, the only reason really, why I wanted to get the book and review it, dissect it, is because this is apparently the book that the Amazon series was based on. One of the problems that I'm coming across is that there are conflicting statements. This book is what the Amazon series was supposed to be mainly based on because of the over 300 and something interviews that were done, and again, conflicting information. Example, when it comes to David B., all of a sudden, he's now being called a sober driver, which is the same in both books, something that we were never told, which is now putting him at the crime scene at the 4 o'clock hour. You know, the 4 o'clock in the morning hour that apparently all of this actually happened. The conflicting information is that in the Amazon series, it's stated that he was driving around the King Road house at around 4 o'clock in the morning and had a strange feeling to hurry up and get home. In the book, it says that he was walking across the lower 40 around 3:59 a.m., which also magically happens to be the exact timestamp for the verified DoorDash driver delivery that we have from Ethan's DoorDash account that was shown to us in the very public self-authenticating records. But again, the series says he was driving. The book says he was walking. So which one was it? Were you a sober driver doing your duty? What kind of car were you driving? You know, that's a big question there too. Or were you not a sober driver like we basically have already been assuming the entire time, since this is the same person that was at the party? You know, the party where Ethan and Xana were, where Bethany apparently saw them at said party. This is also one of the guys from all of the 4chan frat theories when it comes to the fight and the possibility of the involvement in why the university took over and all of the secrecy, which, you know, there's so many videos on that. We're not even going to get into all of that right now. But that's just an example of the inconsistencies on top of the other validated court facts that are being misinterpreted in here, on top of things that have already been proven false that are still in here like it's fact. And I know that James Patterson might be some sort of writer with a reputation for maybe not always telling the truth, and a lot of people say, well, this is technically fiction. But it's not really technically fiction, because he says on the very cover that this is a definitive account. The literal first page of the author's note starts, "This book reads like fiction, but none of it is made up. Every detail in these pages has been meticulously sourced through interviews or has been factually documented, but it's full of false information." And that is why we are going through this book the way that we are. No other reason. I'm actually really disappointed in what I'm being able to debunk in this book, because James Patterson has been such a well-known writer for such a super long time. My father even has several of his books. And this is definitely just not worth the money. Now, where we stopped was right before they started getting into some back history when it comes to Bryan. Now, before we even got this book released, what made me want to buy the book was that there was a portion that was previously released by Vicky Ward, who helped James Patterson write this. And it was a conversation that Michael Kohberger, who's Bryan Kohberger's father, apparently had with a woman who is the mother of one of Bryan Kohberger's friends who has passed away from substances. The conversation that they had in the middle of the store was really interesting and made me want to see what else people actually close to the family had to say, because that is the side of the camp that we have heard literally nothing from. Like there's details, there's some people that have come out and talked that knew Bryan, but when it comes to a lot of the back history and getting information from people who know the actual family, not just Bryan, but the family, it's interesting. And so here we are. We're on chapter 19, which is page 75. And this one, I don't know how much we can really validate this one. I feel like this one's more of maybe this is just an assumption from this person. There is a story in here that at first I was like, is that real or not? But then there's a confession, an actual confession, or let me say an apology is the way that it's written. But this first one, I'm not too sure. This is back in 2013 in the Poconos. And the way that Bryan Kohberger is being described is this tall kid with bulging eyes. But he's also being described as like a thin kid with bulging eyes. So this would have been after the weight loss. So this goes into chapter 19, starting back in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania in 2013. Okay, there's a man named Mark Bayless who's a former Navy SEAL, and he's telling the story about how his son and a couple of other teenage boys, 3 to be precise, so this Bayless guy's kid, apparently Bryan, and another boy would run around the woods playing with knives, with things that boys run around the woods in whenever you live in those areas. Completely normal behavior. Anything from playing paintball to hunting, because that's what people did, that's what people do in the country. But just because Bryan Kohberger would run around with these 2 other guys in the woods while, hunting was happening, doesn't mean that he's good with a blade. Because we also know he's not good with a blade because of what we heard about the fishing story, which would have been a couple of years after this. He's being described as tall with bulging eyes. The bulging eyes is something that is constantly used in all of the descriptions, really, when it comes to the way that people are describing him. Even into adulthood, it's always like bulging eyes. Apparently, though, a bunch of knives and coins and prescription things that you swallow with water usually, and some of his girlfriend's jewelry have been coming up missing, and he can't catch the person who's been doing it. He's reported it to the cops, and reports have been filed, but they haven't done literally anything. And he does say that he doesn't put it together until years later that the thief must have been Bryan. But I'm wondering, like, if you didn't come to that conclusion until after he was arrested, and so it just sort of like made you lean that way, maybe then I really kind of can't say that I honestly believe it, but I can say that it does have more stance than a lot of these other things because, again, there is a similar story later on where Bryan does apologize to the woman for doing, this, for stealing things out of their home. But according to this, $25,000 worth of this coin collection was taken. One by one, piece by piece, they apparently all vanished. $25,000. Are you for real? That is so much freaking money. So there's no way to like paper trail these things, because I'm not going to sit here and believe that Bryan just took it, if he did take it, just to like hold on to it forever and do nothing with it. Somebody who was stealing things for a reason is probably going to try to get money for it. So is there no way to like catch where these coins might have been sold or traded in for something? So apparently at one point, this guy tells his son about what's going on and that whoever it is, he's going to pop him. Like straight up, just put a thing right through him because he's had enough. Bayless talks to his son Jack and his nephew Brandon about the thefts, says what I said he said, and then Jack goes and tells the third kid, Bryan, that his dad is mad, but Bryan tells Jack that he reveres his father. That's what he says, or at least that's what he puts in a text. So is there proof from back in 2013 of a text message that's that old? Did they hold on to those text messages for 11 years to prove that? I mean, honestly, the girl that he had drive to like the pizza place or the restaurant or whatever where he could buy something without her knowledge, which is rude as frick, okay? That was all messages that she was able to bring out, so maybe they do have the messages. But then he says someone starts to stalk him and that the stalker would hide behind the trees, camouflaged out, munching on Reese's peanut butter cups, dropping the wrappers on the ground, waiting for Mark to leave so that he could go in and take stuff. But if that's the case and you're a Navy SEAL, why weren't you putting up cameras? Why weren't you putting up motion detectors? Like, if all of this was really going on back in 2013, all of these things existed, Mr. Navy SEAL. I'm really confused about why you would just leave your house completely unsecure, knowing for a fact that somebody was coming in and stealing your things. You've got $25,000 worth of coins, and you don't put a camera up once you realize that someone's constantly, repetitively, to the point to where you're threatening everybody. You don't do anything to find this person? See, that's why this is also really hard to believe. I take back everything that I originally said. This is just ridiculous. I forgot how ridiculous this was, because I've obviously gone in and, like, taken notes. Okay, there's my pin marks. Yeah, like, the more that I sit back and think about it, see, this is why, I have, like, a thought process whenever I'm reading stuff, but then whenever I'm verbally thinking about it, the more that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, bro, you had all this opportunity to, like, put cameras in places. Like, if you know that they were coins missing, if you knew that there were blades missing, if you knew that jewelry was missing, if you knew that prescriptions were missing, why didn't you put a camera inside the house in the places and have it turned on whenever you were gone? Like, why? See, he comes to believe that Bryan, knowing he has the element of surprise on his side, hides and waits for the veteran to walk towards the back of the house and then sprints out the front door into the woods he knows will protect him through the trees. Like, he basically was in the house whenever dude got back, and that's how he escaped. But after all of this, and again, all of these constant pieces of stuff missing, after all of these times that you apparently call the cops, you don't put a security system out? That's wild. Now, the next chapter goes into Broadheadsville, Pennsylvania, but it goes back to 2012. And this is whenever Bryan is still overweight. And the story starts with Jesse Harris, who's the owner of the boxing gym that he used to go to, Bryan used to go to, is talking about the first time that he sees Michael Kohberger bringing Bryan to the boxing place to meet him for the first time and talk about, like, how he could help him. It says that the gym was set up to offer local people who had given up, teens mostly, hope. Purpose. Anyone who's failed in life can make it in Jesse's gym. Boys looking for brotherhood, girls looking for sisterhood, or to learn self-defense. Anyone who's prepared to work and to train. But again, this was not for, like, competition. It was for confidence building. It was for working on mobility, dexterity. It was, like, normal just to go in there and basically, like, work out your head type thing. He's describing him as a lumbering kid who barely makes eye contact, lets his dad do all of the talking. He introduces himself as Michael and says, "This is my son, Bryan." He says that Bryan wants to start to lose weight, that he has now started changing his habits, and even started a vegan diet. So he needs to build muscle and speed up his metabolism. So in 2012 is whenever the vegan thing actually started. This portion right here is just really stupid and just goes to tell you that this guy, this writer, these two writers are really just in here to make up the most just dramatically sad, emotionally draining bullcrap, okay? Because how would they know anything about what I'm about to read? The other guys in the gym look at the fat kid and roll their eyes. They've given up on him already. He'll never fit in, they're thinking. Jesse wonders if they're right. He too isn't sure about this kid. Okay, but are you telling me that this Jesse guy was monitoring the way that all of these people were judging a child at this point and thinking all of this in his head? Or did y'all really just make this up? Because this crap sounds made up. It goes on to say that Bryan showed up the very next day and that he started basically just doing whatever Jesse told him to do, but that he seemed to really like the rhythm of punching, which, again, is nothing unusual according to the man who created this gym for this to be something for people to use for their mental health. It says right here, Jesse can tell that the kid likes the rhythm of punching. They all do, Jesse thinks. That's why boxing is better than therapy. That's probably something he actually said, because again, that's his whole purpose for this place. And it wasn't just boxing. He was doing other things like the power pad, pulling those big rubber bands like back and forth on your sides to work your arms and stuff like that. Basically, he just did whatever the routine was that he was told to do that was best for him by this Jesse Harris guy. He does also mention that at one point that Michael Kohberger mentioned to him that Bryan was having trouble at school, that he was being bullied, and he doesn't like their new house. Now, remember, there was a story of bankruptcy where they had lost one of their houses. So I guess at this point, this would have been the one that they were living in after that. I'm not sure of the dates for those things. His friend Jeremy was apparently a bad influence, and they had to separate the two boys. Now, Jeremy is the friend of Kohberger's that apparently died from substances. And it was said that Jeremy was like the popular athletic kid, and Bryan was like on the opposite side. And I found it interesting, that friendship dynamic, especially given the fact that now they're claiming that Bryan was being bullied. It's strange that a kid that was friends with the popular athletic kid would be bullied, because you'd think just by association people would leave him alone. I remember it working like that whenever I was in high school. But he does go on to spend at least 2 or 3 hours a day at the gym, which is not a bad thing. If there were other bad things that he was doing, in the meantime, it's much better spent doing this. Chapter 21 moves forward to April of 2013. So we were in 2013, went to 2012, now we're back in 2013. This is where Casey Arntz comes up. Now, she's the one who came out and told us the story about how Bryan had called her or messaged her and said he needed a ride. She took him where he needed to go, and then she later found out that the entire reason why he needed her to take him to that very specific place, and that he went in and came right back out, was because he was buying H. And she went off on him about it. He later apologized to her because he went to rehab, and part of the whole rehab thing is that you have to make amends for the things that you had done. And this is also where we have Brandon Andriola's name coming in. I remember that name as being somebody who was subpoenaed in Pennsylvania that was supposed to be a defense witness for the case, if it would have actually gone to trial. Now, the way that the book is putting it is that she sort of had a crush on Bryan, which I guess could have been possible, but I don't remember her ever really saying that. I could have just missed it. I know that they were friends. I know that they would FaceTime each other. There were screenshots of where you could see in the small screen he was having conversations with girls. So, I mean, maybe. But this is where, again, they tell the story of this, and she picks him up. She takes him to Luna Rosa, which is a restaurant. And all the other crazy stuff ends up happening. See, something that's mentioned in this book that's not in any of the interviews that I remember, I might have missed it, is that he also had her drive him to a CVS. Now, there's a guy that goes by Willie, not William from the more recent controversial situation, but Willie, who goes by Truth Nation Uncensored here on YouTube, that did say at one point that CVS is where needles would be gotten by Bryan. He knew him from in school. So this right here, again, I don't remember her mentioning this in hers, but here it has where he also asked her to go to the CVS so that he could buy needles for his aunt, which ended up not being true. But the Brandon guy is the one who actually told her that it was a well-known thing that's where people bought stuff from. So it says that on May 21st, she sent him a message about, thank you for lying to me and going off on him. And then a day later, so that would be May 22nd of 2013, he responds back late in the evening at 8:30 p.m. according to, I'm sure, the messages that she has, because again, she actually did have proof of their conversations that she brought forward. He responds to her that he's in rehab, and she just says, I know that. It mentions how he gets out of rehab and eventually she does forgive him. They don't really hang out at all. Then in 2014, Bryan tells her to be proud that she's making something of her life because he's not, and then ha behind it, which is sad. Now, I remember her saying something about this before, where in 2014, a whole year after the whole, ride incident, he sends a text that says, I love you guys, always will, even if we stop talking one day. And that she wasn't really sure what he meant by that, but that it was just really random. And it honestly does seem really random for how separate their friendship already seemed to be. Okay, so now we're in 2014, and this is where Bryan Kohberger apparently takes his sister's phone and sells it. See, I don't remember hearing the whole he sold it part of it. So yeah, honestly, I probably would have handled that the same way. If I knew that my kid was getting into stuff the way that Bryan was getting into stuff, and now he's stealing things from the family and selling it, yeah, I probably would have done the same thing. At least he wasn't trying to enable the situation. I don't disagree, if the story's true, about cops being involved, because we do know that substances were also involved here. So that portion of this does matter. The dad tried stuff. They tried the diet to change the way that his chemical workup was. They tried the boxing. They did gun range trips and even separated him from that Jeremy person that we talked about earlier. They did rehab too, and he can't stop himself. So because he can't stop himself, he can't stop stealing things. So basically, when he's using, he's stealing, which is honestly a really common theme. It mentions how he takes Melissa's cell phone and sold it at a mall kiosk for $200. And that at this point, his dad just didn't have a choice. And, you know, I don't disagree. But the only thing that ended up happening is that, you know, he went to rehab, which was something that they'd already tried. But I mean, there's really not much else that they're going to do whenever it's a teenager. Now, in one of the newer docuseries episodes that we got from 2020, there was a voice recording of a guy who claimed to have been friends with Kohberger back whenever all of this stuff with the cell phone happened, that had full knowledge of the intention. He said they were definitely trying to get some stuff that night, that he had gotten a call from Kohberger, he had picked him up, and he had actually taken him to where the phone was to be sold. So he didn't do this on his own, which doesn't take away any responsibility, but there was somebody else apparently involved in this whole thing. So I don't know if they had any charges pressed on them, if the cops talked to them at all, or if it was just strictly the family trying to maybe scare Kohberger into quitting his crap. I don't know, but that was a newer piece of information that we, you know, ended up getting. It also goes on to talk about how he would post stuff on Tapatalk, and on SoundCloud. It talked about that rap song that everyone found in the very beginning, and how he would talk about his visual snow a lot. What I want to do is start going through his visual snow posts so that we can see an escalation, because it's really, really interesting, the very last post that he puts on there. And I'd like to try to figure out exactly where things were going as soon as that last post was posted, because there's a dramatic difference between the first one and the last one. But it says that he does this stuff alone in the basement. Didn't he have his bedroom? What do you mean in the basement? So now it's jumped up to August of 2016. So we've jumped forward 2 years. And again, it starts out, Bryan sits in the basement out of cash and out of friends. Now, this is where the story happens, which sort of makes me want to believe that the original one might have a little bit of stance to it, but I still find it incredibly ridiculous that, again, this Navy SEAL that knew that there was a pattern of things missing, that it was one by one, little bit by little bit, didn't do more to catch the person, like put a damn camera somewhere. Okay? All I'm saying. So in 2016, this is whenever his friend Jeremy was arrested for a DUI and possession. He's just been told this via a text message. Bryan calls Connie, who is Jeremy's mother, to find out what's going on. And that's whenever he finds out that Jeremy's mother and father are going to be going down to the courthouse to visit Jeremy the next day. What happens is that while they're gone, their house was robbed. The garage door was forced open. Her iPad was gone. And at this point, she apparently just knows that it was Bryan Kohberger. But she doesn't call the cops. She doesn't call the cops because she knows here in 2016 that he has Asperger's. And then also knows about the substance problem. So instead of calling the cops, doing anything about it, she just lets it go, thinking about how hard it would be because the Kohbergers work for the school district. Okay, but at this point, like, he's already been arrested. The cops already brought him in for stealing his sister's phone. So maybe she didn't know that portion of this. I don't know. And the only reason why this is believable now, because at the bottom, look, I put right here, assumed no proof, because it's a behavioral pattern. You know, it would be a behavioral pattern. But there is proof, because at the end, he apologizes to her for it. 2 years later, in 2018, is whenever all of a sudden he's like standing in her kitchen. She hasn't seen him in a long time, and he's just in the kitchen. So did he sneak in the house? Did someone let him in? I mean, it just, the way that it's like put in this is a little startling. And that's what it says, that, completely unannounced, startles Connie. And he just stands there, tall, well over 6 feet, towering over her, eyes bugging out. They always describe it that way. His eyes are different, which, again, whenever Dylan says she doesn't recognize him, I said, even with like a mask on that just shows this amount of his face, the way that his eyebrow protrudes, the way the bone is, the way that his nose is a certain, he has a bigger nose, the way his deep set sockets are, she would have at least recognized that portion. And she's claiming not to. So it's difficult for me, that portion, because of how prominent all of that is. She asks what he's doing there, but she knows already, because she knows, what they teach in rehab about apologizing and atonement and those things. And she just says, I knew it was you. Which again goes to the whole thing that Chief Fry was talking about in that case of that kid that was, drunk, and a bunch of people saw him, could have helped him, and didn't want to call the cops, didn't want to do anything because they didn't want to get him in trouble. But then he ended up dead. The whole not calling the cops thing, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't care if I know who you are or not. If you're in my home whenever you're not supposed to be in my home, I'm calling the cops. She says, okay, but leave and don't come back, which I don't blame her. At this point, it's basically she doesn't want Bryan and her son Jeremy together for any reason whatsoever, and Bryan's parents feel the exact same way. His friend is still alive. We do get to that portion of it here in a minute. But we're still in 2018, but now we're in Center Valley, Pennsylvania at DeSales, and that apparently people nicknamed him the Ghost because there's something spooky about him. He wears a wrinkled black long sleeve button down and a tan leather jacket, and he's always carrying his silver laptop and a Starbucks coffee cup. So the leather jacket thing is interesting because vegans that are so strict are definitely not going to wear real leather. Then it says after class that Bryan just poofs. He gets back in his car and he's gone. He doesn't hang around or hang out with anyone. He goes and gets ready for his nighttime security guard job or any other job that he can get. This is where this guy, Josh, pops in and starts talking about how he likes the way that Bryan is with their biology project, but he makes a point to mention his eyes, about how they seem unnaturally wide open and they're constantly darting around while his face is completely still. Well, again, autism, H. At a young age, I imagine it does some damage. I'm just saying. This portion right here is a complete lie. Josh notices that Bryan becomes less aloof and more animated in psychological sleuthing, a class taught by Dr. Catherine Ramslin. Lie. Lie. He has come out on News Nation very, very, very recently and said, I just want to make it clear. The only class I ever had with Bryan Kohberger was biology.
I don't remember a single class we had together except biology. He, as a collective group of students, took these classes not together. I only remember biology courses. However, as a student, he was very astute, very diligent, and he was a pleasure to work with.
They didn't take a single psych class together. So this is a complete lie. And if James Patterson would have really done his due diligence, he would have known that. It goes on to talk about the crime scene house that they put together. And again, when I was getting my degree, that's the kind of teaching that I would have definitely wanted. Take me into something real. Let me put my hands on something. Seriously, that's perfect. It goes on to say how he would take careful notes and that he would write essays. And I'm just like every other student. They were apparently also taught that for the majority, white men choose knives. That's a really so stupid of a statement. You know why? Go and look at the crimes in other countries where there's a bunch of not this color people. They majorly, because they don't have as much access to pew-pews as we do, it's majorly a bunch of stuff with knives. And I love how they make sure that we know that they also learned how it's impossible to delete one's digital footprint. Not only was digital forensics, cloud-based forensics, what Kohberger wanted to focus on, but they are also trying to come out and tell us that they can't prove any sort of connection or anything else because he used something to wipe his devices, to clean his system. Yet they find these searches that are sort of questionable, the corn ones. Then you have all of the serial killer searches that really don't mean anything because of the literal assignments that he was being handed at the time. There's a lot of things besides, in my opinion, the corn searches that can be explained away for a million other things on top of the fact that there's no direct evidence of anything. They know that digital footprints and things that are out on the interwebs are never, ever, ever truly deleted. So they cannot say that and then also claim, oh, he deleted it, we couldn't find it, but because it's not there, it must mean this. No, that's not at all how that works. And that's literally what's happening right now. He apparently texted one of his friends named Jack that he wanted to catch high profile offenders. Well, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the people that go to college to do this kind of thing really do hope that they get some sort of high profile case. I'm pretty sure lots of them think that. It also talks about how there's an argument when it comes to psychopaths about how they're not a product of socioeconomics and environment alone. Biology has a larger role than people previously thought, which I believe, because people can literally just be born completely jacked up in the head. They can be given every opportunity, be given a silver spoon, nothing go wrong in their childhood, and just be not okay. Something that's a strange insinuation here is that while it's talking about how even if a child is born like genetically wired like this, that as long as there is therapy and some sort of intervention by age 4, there can be training in order to change the brain. And it says, Bryan listens carefully to this and takes more notes. His classmates can't see what he's writing. Probably like notes on what everyone's listening to. Like the insinuations here are actually insane. Okay, so this is about halfway. The beginning of the next chapter, it is the beginning of the incel theory. They introduce Elliot Rogers. They are wild. They're basically describing this guy like this gorgeous movie star. It says something about how if you muted the video, you would swear you were looking at the next Tom Cruise. I'm sorry? Like, wild, just wild. So that's going to be in the next video, but I want to know what you guys are thinking so far about the history that we're seeing. A lot of it, honestly, is not shocking. We knew about this addiction issue years and years ago whenever this case first started, whenever he was first arrested, all of the things. There's a lot of other things that are very questionable in some of the other chapters, though, that I've gotten to here. The biggest theme is the silence, and not the silence that caused all the drama. The silence between Moscow and Pullman, all of a sudden, that seems so extremely out of the ordinary. And it started before Chief Fry even got back to campus. That's an issue for me. Because Pullman keeps doubling down. Chief Jenkins keeps doubling down, not just in this book, but in the interviews that he has been out here doing, doubling down on the fact that the Pullman Police Department, were getting frustrated because for once Moscow wasn't talking to them. And again, that started whenever there was a phone call between Chief Jenkins and Chief Fry, while Chief Fry was still on his way back to Moscow from being out of town whenever all of this happened. And he found it strange then. So how would Chief Fry have just had an inkling from literally before he ever even got to the scene to not talk to Pullman about anything? And look who ended up being the person arrested. That's just really strange to me. And that's just what keeps coming back over and over again. Not obviously in what I just read to you, but what I read myself today. It just brought me back to that first portion. So I want to know what you guys think about that. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out, subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already, and please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.